Mermaids were mythical aquatic creatures known from a variety of legends and traditions, part woman, part fish. These daughters of the sea, with a deadly mindset, emerged from the waves to lure men into their embrace. Beautiful, intriguing, and dangerous, mermaids would do anything to protect their homes. Some stories depict them as perilous beings, commonly associated with storms, shipwrecks, and drownings. In other folklore, or sometimes within the same popular tradition, they could be benevolent, bestow blessings, or fall in love with humans. Other tales recount that mermaids were known to gather in Whitecap Bay for hundreds of years, terrifying both sailors and pirates. These mermaids were drawn to the surface by man-made lights and the singing of sailors. Furthermore, they charmed their prey with their beauty before dragging them into the depths to devour them. As creatures of legend and tradition, mermaids, though beautiful, were also feared and referred to as sea demons, known for their terrible hunger for human flesh. Mermaids were also linked to the legend of the Fountain of Youth, discovered by Ponce de Leon in 1523. Those seeking the fountain and knowledge of the profane ritual had to capture a mermaid in Whitecap Bay. Only a mermaid's tear placed in one of the Cartagena chalices would activate the fountain's rejuvenating forces. On many journeys to the fountain, the jungle pools were used to harvest the tears of these creatures, leaving them within reach of water, but allowing their bodies to slowly dry under the sun. When the creatures died, they left behind only the remains of their marine form. Sometime after Ponce de Leon's discovery, a mermaid would be depicted on the Mao Kun map, one of the few guides to the Fountain of Youth. Captain Jack Sparrow first encountered mermaids on Mermaid Island after escaping from Isla Escalatica during his quest for the Sword of Cortez. His crewmates were affected by the mermaid's song, though Jack himself remained immune to their influence. Unable to sway him, the mermaids instead transported Jack to Mermaid Island, where they attempted to enslave him. Jack was tricked into giving up a prized possession, the Eye of Stone Sam, in exchange for his crew's lives. Moreover, his freedom would be forfeited the next time he visited Mermaid Island. Despite realizing this stipulation, he was compelled to return to the mermaid's lair to retrieve the eye and thus defeat the spirit of Hernan Cortez. He negotiated his enslavement with the leaders of the blue-tailed mermaids and defeated two predatory beasts to avoid eternal imprisonment. The mermaids allowed Jack to leave the island, and he later recovered the eye to give to Tia Dalma. During the quest for the Fountain of Youth, Blackbeard and his crew traveled to Whitecap Bay to capture a mermaid and use her in the profane ritual. Blackbeard used his crew as bait, as well as the artificial light from a lighthouse to attract the mermaids. Furthermore, Scrum was forced to sing a song, as sailors singing also attracts mermaids. Blackbeard's plan to lure the mermaids was quite successful. However, the mermaids began a lethal attack on his crew, and Jack Sparrow was forced to cause an explosion at the lighthouse to scare them off. Later, a young mermaid named Syrena proved to be very different from her kind and was left behind to be captured by Blackbeard's men. The next day, the mermaids returned to attack the HM's Providence, dragging it and the crew aboard to the depths. Mermaids were amphibious beings, a hybrid between humans and fish. The average mermaid had the appearance of a beautiful woman with long, loose hair and skin speckled with scales. However, from the waist down, a mermaid consisted of a long, shiny, and scaly tail. Despite their great beauty, mermaids concealed sharp, fang-like teeth in their mouths. The true form of mermaids was very different from their beautiful disguise. The mermaids of Mermaid Island had sea-colored hair and pearly skin covered in scales. If seen peripherally, they lost their outer beauty and seemed to transform into creatures with tentacles, claws, and fangs. They often spoke in harmonious form, singing melodies commonly attributed to them. Mermaids possessed superhuman strength and were strong enough to break wood with their own hands. In large numbers, they were even known to topple great ships. They were capable of dragging a fully crewed ship, such as the Providence, underwater with very little effort. The mermaids of Whitecap Bay were known to feed on men, seeing them only as sustenance. They might appear beautiful, but could tear off a human limb in seconds. These mermaids were known to use long strands of seaweed as a form of lasso to pull sailors from ships or cliffs beyond their reach. Their long and powerful tails made them very fast swimmers, and they were expert hunters underwater. These tails provided such a thrust that they could leap out of the water to grab any unfortunate sailor from the decks of ships before diving back in. Their tails were covered in a scaly, translucent membrane that floated around them and shed when they were out of the water to reveal human legs. They could survive long enough on land to drag a sailor back to the sea. The mermaids of Whitecap Bay also had the ability to go ashore in human form, as they had human legs beneath the skin of their tails. Despite this, if they were partially in the water, their mermaid form returned, and if they spent too much time out of water, they would begin to dry out and eventually die. Mermaids also appeared to have some degree of psychic ability, as Syrena displayed these abilities when she saved Philip, because she felt he was different, as he protected people, unlike other men she and her kind had encountered in the past. Stories and legends of mermaids commonly depicted sweet and innocent creatures, though more sinister versions spoke of corrupt merfolks allied with the mermaids. In reality, there were thousands of the latter type alone on Mermaid Island, and this legion was known to gather to drag sailors into the depths, a trait also shared with the mermaids of Whitecap Bay. The mermaids of Mermaid Island were part of the merfolk, who were a branch of mermaids but with more human bodies, and they dedicated themselves to fulfilling the will of the mermaids of Mermaid Island, who in turn were ruled by Davy Jones. They resided within the chambers of Mermaid Island and had control over various creatures that lived in Davy Jones's locker, including iguana monsters and sea beasts. The merfolk at some point had contact with Tia Dalma and had extensive knowledge of all mystical and legendary artifacts. There were at least 3 separate subspecies of mermaids on Mermaid Island, distinguished by the color of the scales on their tails. Those with green tails served as guardians and soldiers and operated as the military arm of society. They confronted sailors lured to Mermaid Island and dragged them into the depths to be devoured. The ones with red tails were the servants of society and were generally seen wandering near the beaches of Mermaid Island. Lastly, those with blue tails served as leaders of the mermaids. The 3 blue-tailed mermaids encountered by Jack Sparrow were named leaders by the green-tailed and red-tailed ones, demonstrating a society with democratic tendencies. Despite the aforementioned, it was difficult to discern what bond a mermaid had with her sisters, but it seemed to be quite cold, as when Syrena was captured, the other mermaids retreated without any visible concern. Furthermore, when Syrena was forced to look at the numerous mermaid corpses and Blackbeard mocked the death of her companions, she did not seem particularly affected. However, she showed a slight trace of emotion, perhaps anger, towards the men because of their actions. Blackbeard described the mermaids as tough and strong-willed, so it was rare for them to shed real tears. It was a popular belief that a tear of joy is the most powerful type of tear, and the merfolk believed that one pours death into life and life into death, referring to how the fountain of youth works. Despite all their actions, not all mermaids were evil. Some were capable of having a compassionate and loving side, especially Syrena. She appeared to be unique among her kind, as she was the only known mermaid to actually develop feelings for a human. Although this was not the case with Marina, who had a relationship with Jack Sparrow at some point in her life. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed my video, I'd love to recommend another one for you to watch.